All right, Adam. So let me ask you this. Why should an entrepreneur, why should a leader, why should they consider and take podcasting seriously today?
There's never been a greater time to start a podcast. Think about it this way. YouTube's about 14, 15 years old. If you knew that YouTube was going to be what it is today, #2 search engine in the world, would you have started a YouTube channel, let's say year 2 of YouTube? Absolutely, you would have. Podcasts have been around for a long time, but we're really in a renaissance. It's never been a time like this. Think of this like this. We're in year 2 of YouTube. So in 10 years, 14 years down the line, everybody's going to be wishing they had a podcast.
That's awesome. So thank you so much for watching this today. And today we got a special guest, Adam Torres with Mission Matters. And Adam has now hosted over 3,000 podcasts. He's the host of 8 different shows. And he's worked literally with hundreds of entrepreneurs, organizations from around the world, helping them get their message out there through both podcast and through publishing. So Adam, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh man, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on your show.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here. So let's dive straight in. So you just answered and explained why podcasting, and it's so true. So if you could have been at the beginning of YouTube, would you and should you have? And the answer is absolutely. So what impact have you seen podcasts have on businesses and on organizations once they get started with podcasting?
So I think the tricky part for people with podcasting is they first off, I have interviewed literally thousands of people. That's not hyperbole, it is. And a lot of times they'll get on the line and they're like, oh, well, I'm nervous. This is my first podcast. I'm like, is this your first time on the phone? It's a phone call. Like you can do it on the phone. You can do it with the mic. Like you have a fancy studio. I use this. I recorded thousands of episodes on this. And hold on, I recorded my first 300 episodes using my, it's on the other side, but I won't get it, but using my earbuds from not even like the pods or whatever. I mean your regular Apple headphones, the white ones from like the back in the day, regular one and an iPhone. It might have been a 5 or 6. I don't even remember. I did my first 300 episodes like that. I built an audience and I built many brands off of that. So people like to let this like equipment thing be like, it's like intimidating. And I'm like, if you can do it on the phone, you can do it so many different ways. It's so easy. So for me, I've seen it completely change people's businesses from one simple standpoint. So first off, I will start by saying I'm biased. Obviously, I help people start podcasts and I do a lot of podcasts and I'm obviously addicted to podcasting, right? Who does that many podcasts? Kind of crazy. But here's the thing. Why I got addicted to it is because it's so easy. Meaning, you want to write a blog? Go try and write a blog. I do 50 to 70 episodes a week on my podcast. Not everybody should do that. How long would it take me to write 50 to 70 blog posts? You need a whole army to do that. Impossible. You want to do YouTube videos? You want to do other things like that? How long does a good YouTube video take to get through that market? Ain't happening. You could spend a month on a really good YouTube video. Podcast, it's all about that human interaction. It's all about that feel. So it's a different type of content, and it's giving audiences what they want, which is reality. They want reality.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So one of the things you said in there resonates with us and kind of what we stand for here at Ugly Mug Marketing. And we often say that that results and excuses are mutually exclusive. So the more of excuses you have, the less results or the less success you have. And from what you're saying about, people using equipment as an excuse, look at you used your headphones from your iPhone to get started. So what would you say, obviously you could do it with your headphones, your AirPods or whatever to get started, but what would you say is a realistic startup cost in terms of equipment that someone would need to actually get started in podcasting?
So first off, I have a completely free podcast course that will go through everything on there. So it's on our website, missionmatters.com. It takes 1 hour to go through, and it's a real course. So it's not a course where I'm just down there saying, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. It's an actual course. I go through and I show you step by step what you need to do. It's under 1 hour, completely free, missionmatters.com. Or there is a full, for those that want to take their game to the next level, 77 plus videos, complete course. I take you through everything from media kits to, I take you from here to like professional level. So that's one thing that I'll tee that up with. But realistically, startup costs, I've helped people start up podcasts for Zero, literally zero. I can show you how to do it for zero, meaning you can use Anchor, you can use your headphones. My first podcast, I didn't even want to start a podcast. I sell books. I published over 30 books. I sell books. My team was like, Adam, you got to do a podcast. I'm like, I'm not doing no podcast. I don't want to do a podcast. I don't need to do that. They're like, Adam, do a podcast. I'm like, I'm not investing any money. I don't want to do it. Like, it's going to take away from our bottom line. I don't want to do it. This was me 3 years ago. I'm like, I don't want to do it. This is going to show me how you can't prove. Am I going to sell ads? No, I don't want to do it. I didn't understand it. We started doing the podcast. Our book sales went up. The name, the brand, everything went up at the same time. We were still at zero, to the point to where I did my first 1,500 episodes with no cost by using things like Audacity, free audio thing on the free audio software that you use. And again, I go through all this stuff in the course. Audacity. We had it on Anchor, which originally that's fine until we got bigger. So I talk about in the course why you don't want to do that. Now we use something else like Buzzsprout. We use Buzzsprout. You can use whatever you want, but and I go through this in the course. But these are small softwares, like $10, $15, maybe $20 a month. So you can go all the way from free to you can spend, $20, $100, $200, or you can hire an agency and they can do it also. So you can also do that. Editing can be anywhere between, it really just depends, but just say a budget per month of $0 to $1,200 is what I tell people, depending on what you want done. That's a realistic budget. And if you have the money to spend $1,200, it means you're a big company and you have a lot more things and you need some really a la carte service. And don't think just audio production, think time. You probably don't want to have your marketing company doing the editing and making sure the guest shows up, right? So you're going to want to outsource all of that stuff. Doesn't make sense because it's a different skill set than your in-house marketing company has. So it's a completely different thing. But again, you can do it for $0 for those of you out there listening. So there's zero. So you can do it for $0. So there's zero excuse for starting.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. We'll put a link to where they can go to find your course in the description of this video to make it easy. Let me ask you this. What would you say are the characteristics or the traits of those who are successful with their podcasts? In other words, they start growing their podcast audience, they reach more people, and it helps drive their business, drive sales to their company, their organization, whatever it may be, versus those who kind of languish or stay small. In other words, they don't ever seem to get traction. Are there any characteristics or traits that you've identified between those who scale and those who kind of, can't get the traction they need to grow their podcast?
So it's one word. There's literally one word, and that's consistency. But I do want to break that answer down on what consistency is. So in order to really understand what consistency means in your expectation is there's, for the most part, two different types of podcast shows. One is the interview style like we're doing right now. The other is the monologue. You're just going to go on there and teach a lesson. A lot of the monologue people that I met, they start off with good intentions, but it's really hard. It's really hard to do a monologue unless you just are that person that can do that all day long and talk on one subject. Otherwise, you sound like you're rambling, and it's just not. Some people will, and by the way, rambling's fine. So there's an audience for that. So I would still say if you're going to be do a monologue where it's just you, then consistency is twice as important as the interview style, because now you have to make sure that people are really in tune with your voice. It's almost like people are becoming mesmerized or addicted to your voice over time, because that does happen. So 100% will happen. I brought somebody on the show the other day, and he's like, "You should see my setup over here, Adam." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "I got one earbud in listening to your show and the other one waiting for your call so we can do the interview." And I got kind of freaked out because it was you on the line. I know that sounds silly because, I'm a 50-year-old man and blah, blah. And I was just dying laughing. So don't underestimate voice. Like voices, it's different. I like to tell people this. Okay, think about your favorite artist or musician. Some of them may have a slightly different voice. Some of them may not. Some songs that you listen to in the beginning, you didn't even like. But after the 10th time you listen to it, it's like, yeah, whatever. I'm going to keep listening. Then after the 100th time, it's your favorite song. So for me, my goal is to stay in front of my audience. Maybe the first time you listen to it, you're like, this guy sucks. All right, I'm going to listen to this one again just because I want to laugh at him. I don't care. But by the 10th time, then after a while, you're like, oh, let's listen to some more. And then before you know it, you're telling people you like me. I'm like, all right, that's cool. I'm in. So that's the way to think about this. And that's the importance of consistency. So to finish that up, The interview style is what I recommend to 99% of my clients. No, that's an exaggeration. 80% of my clients. The only ones that I recommend a monologue for are going to be like certain people that have maybe you're a business consultant, you already have a lot of published work, so you have a lot of other things, and you have a very structured thing. Like, if you've been a business consultant for 30 years, you may not need to do the interview because, number one, you're probably not, it's going to be hard for you to get people that you're going to get that are above you in terms of expertise, I should say, for a consistent episode, right? You're not going to be able to knock on cousin Elon Musk's door all the time, say, hey, Elon, can we do a quick, come on, cousin, can we do a quick episode? Probably not going to happen. So it's going to be hard to find consistent guests that are above your pedigree of knowledge, which is important and in certain types of shows. So if you're that type of person, then it's like, just do the monologue yourself. You could talk about it every day. Pick one topic, and you've got 100 topics that you've been talking about for 30 years. You're fine. You have content. But that's, again, 20% maybe of our clientele. The rest, though, 100% interview. Interview just opens up the game. Now it's easy. It's like, can you pick up the phone, or can you pick up a headset? Or if you have more means and or technical knowledge, and if you even want to do it, then have a beautiful studio like yours. I mean, you can do all those things. It's just your goal for the show.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that, because you're hitting on all these things that we often talk about here at our company. And that is, we always say that consistency creates miracles. And we talk about that with our clients in a lot of what we're trying to get them to do, right? So whether it's making posts on social media, whether it's email their list consistently, consistency does create miracles. So before we wrap up, one last question. What would you say is the one mistake, or maybe the one or two mistakes that you see people making when they get started? So they come to you, maybe they take your course, they're excited about getting going, and they jump in with both feet, but then they kind of make a few mistakes and they lose that momentum, or they lose that enthusiasm. What are those mistakes, or what are the mistakes you see people making that kind of trip up their path towards success, I guess?
I'm going to pick on myself here because we made this mistake, and you're going to die laughing, and you're going to be like, and quick side note, my background, I was a financial advisor and in finance for almost 14 years. I've only been full-time in media for the last 4 years. I learned quick, so I catch up pretty quick, but this isn't my background. And so so just to be clear, so the mistake that I made, and I'm embarrassed to say this because it's so bad, I'm with episodes, and so nobody, like, I was building an audience, all these other things, and I was doing it, and everything we've done is organic. We haven't done anything paid, but we put out such quantity. It just happens for us. But for most people, they're not going to put out any, because they're running other businesses. You're not going to be in the media business when you start your podcast, nor should you be, by the way. It's a hard business. It's a hard road. You want to have a bigger product or a bigger message or sale. Like, you do not want to be out there selling ads and like this. If that's your expectation, then you're saying it's equivalent of saying you want to be in the entertainment business, which, okay, that's fine. People make it, but you have to know that's going to be a grind. It's hard to do what we do. So that's not, just to be clear, in the difference between a professional podcaster in my media company and an everyday podcast. And I don't mean every day as in quality. I just mean realistic expectation on outcome. If you have a business and you're starting a podcast, number one, to give back by giving information and do all the other reasons, and to join the overall podcast community, which is amazing. It's just like a YouTube community, but in my opinion, better. I think it's not as many trolls, all the other things that happen. I love YouTube, by the way. I'm not picking on it, but I just mean YouTube's tough. Like, YouTube is different. Podcasting community, people are warm. They're nice. They're like, yeah, come on my show, or yeah, come on my show. And it's just different. So just to be clear. But again, back to the number one mistake. We have been in business going on 4 years. I've done almost 3,000 podcast episodes. We just started our newsletter and we have probably, I don't know, depending on which list we're using, anywhere from 10 to a 40,000 person list. We just started doing that maybe 3 months ago, and we still grown. So we have no excuse. And why did it not get done? Because my team told me to do it, but I had them on other projects, and I just it was one of those back burner items. And you're like, so if you're out there listening and you have a podcast and the only person that knows is your wife or husband or partner or whatever, and maybe your kids, or Or even worse, shame on you if you have a podcast and your mom doesn't know, or your parents, assuming they're with it. I mean, like your mom needs to know you have a podcast. Like if your mom doesn't know you have a podcast and all her friends, then that's the problem. They don't promote. And the number one way to promote social media, great, but your email list, send out that freaking email list and say, hey, here goes our latest episode. And guess what? On the bottom of that, put a little ad. Just put schedule a call or whatever. We work with a lot of doctors. We work with a lot of doctors, lawyers, people that normally wouldn't have a podcast because they're not technically savvy, or they don't know what to do, or it's just tough. And all we do is we put this little ad on the bottom. This is not secret sauce. We put a little ad on the bottom, and I'm not kidding you. We have one podcast we do. Look up her podcast online. You don't believe me. Rich Feet Podcast. She's a podiatrist. Put a little ad on the bottom. I didn't tell her you're into results-driven marketing. For me, I'm in delivery. So a box is saying, I released your podcast. So I'm not claiming I'm the results guy. I'm claiming check mark, you paid me to release and edit your episode. It's done. Order fulfilled. I'm not guaranteeing your show. We'll help you make it better. We do coaching and all that stuff. But we're getting leads. We're getting scheduled appointments trackable for a podiatrist on a podcast called Rich Feet Podcast. That's email. Awesome. The email did it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
So just letting you know, everybody should have a podcast. I use that one because somebody right now is thinking, that's not for me though, or I'm not in it. Come on, we're talking about feet on a podcast, and like there's a market for everything out there. The market's huge.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And thanks for sharing that specific example, because that gives the listeners, people watching this, something to actually, like you said, to kind of squash those excuses that may be popping up, like, well, my business is different, or it wouldn't work for me because, if it can work for her, then absolutely it can work for your organization. Well, Adam, if you don't mind, tell people where they can go to learn more about you, learn more about the free course that you mentioned, and where they can connect with you.
Oh man, so everything really, missionmatters.com. That's your number one. If you're on social, it's Ask Adam Torres everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, it's all Ask Adam Torres. You put in Ask Adam Torres on Google or anywhere else, and you're probably going to hear more or see more of me than you ever wanted to, needed to, or cared to. 8 different podcasts, all different niches, everything from fitness to entertainment to business, money. We have a tech podcast. We have a marketing podcast. We probably got podcasts I'm forgetting right now on this list, but check us out. Love to have you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Adam, and we'll make sure to link to your site in the description of this video as well. So thank you again.
Thank you.